What do you wonder? As you grow up in and around faith, some of the things that you were taught when you were younger don't seem to line up. They don't seem to make sense as you get older. And sometimes we feel like that the people who were helping shape how we view life and our worldview maybe didn't give us all the facts. And sometimes it grows so serious in nature that people wander away from their faith completely. They throw everything out because they find that some of the things that they learned when they were young didn't add up. Now, one of the challenges for a lot of us as Christians is understanding what faith is not and understanding what faith is. So we're going to tackle that today. We're going to jump into it and learn about faith. But we learned from first week that the reason that we wonder about things is because our frame of reference does not provide us with all of the answers. That perspective that we had doesn't answer every question. And so there are people who deconvert or maybe even walk away or just are on a continual kind of spiritual journey because their frame of reference never takes into account or never really resolves all of the things that they face in their life. We wonder because our frame of reference isn't clear, it's cluttered. We have been let down, we've been disappointed, we've been lied to, we have been misled, and sometimes we've just assumed too much. And so as a result of that, our frame of reference becomes clouded, and we start trying to rework that frame. Now, the reason our frame of reference is so important to us is because our frame of reference sets the stage for what we believe. If I were to ask you, what do you believe? What are the important things that you believe in life? You would be able to kind of outline those, and that belief affects, how you will behave. Your behavior comes out of your belief system, and even your hope comes out of your belief system. So that's why our framework is so very important, how we view life, how we see life, because it will shape for us our behaviors and also how we hope. Now, here's what Christians believe. Christians believe that God became one of us to clarify things for all of us. God became one of us to clarify things for all of us. It is unique that God came in Christianity, God came to our side of the frame to help us see things from the proper perspective. It isn't a list of to-dos and to-don'ts, but Jesus himself came as God and came to live for us and to show us how to view life. Now, if this is true, and I believe it is, that God came to clarify for us, we have in Jesus, the son of a carpenter, the ability to reframe our perspective. And I'm going to show you how we're going to do that with respect to faith today. In other words, Jesus can fix your faith. Turn to your neighbor and say, your faith needs fixing, and Jesus can fix it, all right? He can fix it. You didn't have a neighbor, so you can say it to me, right? All right. Now, last week we looked, or a couple weeks ago rather, we looked at a passage in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 2, talked about fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. Now, when we wander, we sometimes wander away, and if you've wandered away considering you have questions that can't be answered, or you don't know what's going on, hopefully you're going to leave here today understanding that the reason why that happens is because what you have fixed your attention on, or your eyes on, or your life on is something other than Jesus. Whenever we get our eyes on something else than Jesus, then our faith is at risk. We need to fasten our eyes, as the author of Hebrews said, on Jesus. Fix our eyes on him and let him shape our perspective. You're late. No, I'm just kidding. Hi, welcome. Come on down. I'm just picking on you, RJ. I knew you were coming in a little late because of your work. We're glad you're here. Maybe you believe that Christianity required a mind-numbing kind of faith, that you needed to have kind of faith in faith. You grew up hearing that. that it's all about faith. And that if you don't have faith, you can't have Christianity, and it needs to be mind-numbing. You don't need to ask questions. You don't need to investigate. You don't need to really check this thing out, because you just need to accept it, and you'll have faith, or you reject it and you don't have faith. I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands, but a number of us heard versions of that, even those who grew up in church, that we were to have faith in faith and push aside doubt and questions and things like that. But in reality, Jesus never taught that. The original followers of Jesus were never asked not to examine the facts. The original followers of Jesus were never asked not to ask questions. In fact, Jesus put fact into faith as he was walking among them, as God was walking among mankind. He put fact into faith. He healed the sick, and he worked miracles among them. He fulfilled prophecy in their midst, things that they had believed for hundreds of years as a people that were prophesied in the Old Testament, and they saw them come to fact in the life of Jesus. And Jesus overcame death. He is the only dead man still talking, right? Jesus overcame death, and it's huge, these facts of Christianity. It is not faith in faith, but we have facts and evidence to prove what we believe and to move forward in our faith. Often it helps us when we ask the question, what is faith? And often it helps us, we've learned before, to learn what something is not in order to better understand what it is. So first of all, we're going to learn two things that faith is not. The first one is faith is not some kind of force or power. Luke, trust in the force. Let the force be with you. So faith is not force or a power. Faith is not some kind of a kryptonite that you and I can gather enough of, and if we do so, then we would cause God to do something that he would not otherwise be inclined to do. We would bring it into his presence and weaken him to bow to our will or our desires, and that suddenly God would do something that he's not otherwise inclined to do. That we have some kind of a force or some kind of a power in faith that moves things about. Now, some of you may have heard something along that line as you were growing up, as you grew up in church, or as you heard about Christianity. You may have heard something similar to that you could just believe and have the right kind of faith, and you could force something to happen. You don't have a good car, have the right faith, put it into practice, and you'd force God to give you the Cadillac that you want, or whatever it is. So some of you may have heard something along that line. So first of all, we need to dismiss that. Faith is not a power or a force that we can enact upon God or inside Christianity, right? You put into practice, and when we put that kind of thing into practice in our lives, we don't get what we think we need or deserve, and we get disappointed, and sometimes we wander and start to wonder what is going on. So the second thing that faith is not a formula. Faith is not a formula. Now, some of us heard as we were growing up that faith was a formula. Maybe you were taught this in church when you grew up. You just need to pray a certain way. You need to act a certain way, so that you can get the things that you need. It's just a formula, 1 + 1 = 2, and there's a formula of faith. If you'll do A, B, and C, it just kind of works out for you, just like it did for everyone else who worked that formula. You just need to learn the formula. So faith is not a formula. But here's what the Bible says that it is, read a moment ago. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for. Now, if you're writing in your journals today, what I would like you to do is to write this down and then put a box around it, okay? Hope, and you can put, this is the definition of hope, so put your colon there, hope, and then hope is wanting something to be with no guarantee. Hope is wanting something to be with no guarantee, right? So we box that in, all right? All of us have hopes. We want something to be, but there's no guarantee, right? It is just us hoping. And so the author in Hebrews starts off by telling us, now faith is confidence in what we hope for. Hope is wanting something to be with no guarantee. Now faith happens when hope so becomes confident something will happen. Now what happens is when hope so becomes be so, if you will. And so the author goes on to say, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Hebrews 11:1. How do we get from hope so to assurance? How do we move from, I hope it's going to happen to I really know that it's going to happen? I want you to think for just a moment, because you know the answer to this. You do. We're going to bring it right home to you and put it in your backyard. How do you know that you're going to get a raise at work? How do you know, and you move from, boy, I hope I get a raise at work, to I'm going to get a raise at work? Well, the answer is the person in authority at your job who has the authority to do this walks into your cubicle and says, you're going to get a raise, right? And suddenly what happens to us is we move from I hope I'm going to get a raise to I'm going to get a raise, right? It transforms us. So when the person in authority that has the authority to bring this to pass comes into our environment and says, guess what? It's going to happen. You're going to get a raise. We suddenly move from I hope I'm going to get a raise to I'm getting a raise. In fact, I'll take all you guys to lunch today, right? Because I'm going to get a raise. I'm so excited about the raise that I'm going to get, the transformation that's going to take place for me as a result of that. So this is what happens. This is how we move from hope so to confidence that something is going to happen. Man, I hope I get a raise, to I'm absolutely getting a raise. So when a promise is assured, we can believe it. So faith defined for us would be confidence that God is and will do what He promised to do. Now that again is not faith in faith, because we have a track record of God keeping His promises throughout time. I'll give you one example that we want to talk about today, and that is a man by the name of Abraham. Now, before you entered this room, how many of you knew about Abraham? Okay, a number of you knew about Abraham before you came into this room. How many of you know that Abraham became a great nation? Okay, God promised him that he would become a great nation, and Abraham became a great nation. Now, don't look at me that way. You don't know anybody who's became a great nation, do you? You don't know one soul. Oh yeah, I knew Bob and his wife. They had 3,000 kids. They became their own nation. No, you don't. We are grounded and rooted in facts and Scripture that what God said comes to pass. What God said He would do, He does. He performs. And so God said to Abraham that he was going to become a great nation. We read about the heroes of faith in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 2, and Abraham's listed among them. One of the great heroes of faith. They all died with the promise, knowing that the promise was there, but not fully seeing that promise, and God brought it to pass anyway. God brought that promise to pass all the way up through Jesus. And so faith is the belief that God is, and it's based on the evidence and the faith that keeps His promises from ages long. God keeps His promises. And so we are not asking in Christianity for you just to dispense with your questions and your doubts, but we're saying, go look at the facts. Go look at the tomb where Jesus is no longer. Go investigate the facts of Christianity, and what you will find is that faith is based in evidence. We believe because He did. God said to Abraham, I'll make you a great nation. And He made him a great nation. And then He said something kind of interesting. He said, I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, And whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples of the earth, Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, will be blessed through you. This was unheard of. It still was unheard of. You and I are watching on the nightly news about ISIS. They are not arising to become a kind of a force or a nation to give things away, right? And to help people. And this has been age-long throughout history. All nations, if they were going to be great, sought to take, not to give. None of the empires rose up in history because they gave everything away. They rose in history because they took territory. They took captive people. They made them, forced them to build for them and to move forward. And God's saying to Abraham, the nation that I am going to build through you is going to be unique. It's something that the world has never seen. It is going to be a nation that blesses. All of the world will be blessed through you. And we see that happen through Jesus Christ, through the birth of Jesus Christ, through the Jewish nation. Bringing hope to the world, God coming to our side of the frame to give us a proper perspective of how to see life. And we read in the New Testament about Mary giving birth in Luke chapter 1, verse 7, and 2, verse 7, and she gave birth to the firstborn son. And the Bible tells us that all of the people in the heroes of faith died living in faith that what God said was going to happen, because they also had a track record of God doing what He said that He was going to do. And so our faith is not mystical. It's not faith in faith. It's grounded in evidence. We know that God is going to do what He said He was going to do because we have evidence that He's done it. Christianity teaches that God is to be worshiped. He cannot be manipulated. He's to be trusted. He keeps His promises. You may have been raised to see faith as a force or faith as a formula, but here is a reason why some people are struggling today in understanding their faith. Your struggle in faith is a control problem, not a faith problem. You want to be in the driver's seat, you want to make things happen, and you like it if faith is a force or a formula, because that puts you in the driver's seat. You can do what you seemingly want to do, but if you have to trust in God and believe in Him and let Him bring it to pass, we're no longer in the driver's seat. In order to move from hope to confidence, you must put control in the hands of God. It was the pagans and not the Christians that wanted the gods to do their bidding. They offered sacrifices, they did the things that they did to make God do what they wanted Him to do. When God does not come through in a way that you wanted, what happens to your faith and what do you wonder about? And the question comes back then, what is our faith really fixed on? What is it really fastened to? God's promises for you are more wonderful than anything that you can possibly imagine. God demonstrated His love for us. It says in the book of Romans that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Before we made Him our Lord and our leader, He died for us. He came to our side of the frame to help us get a proper perspective before we did anything. And we're invited. I want to invite the worship team to come. We are invited by God to fix our eyes on Him, to trust Him not because He says, oh, trust me, but to trust Him because there is evidence, historical evidence all the way up to our day and our time, even evidence in your own life of God coming through, answering situations, fulfilling His promises to you, to all of mankind throughout history. And the invitation is, fix your eyes on me. If you're wondering and it's causing you to wander, just get your eyes on me and things will take on a proper perspective. you'll be able to see things appropriately.